All right, my friends, welcome into episode 179 of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. We make our way into the month of December. Happy holidays to all of you. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving for those of you listening here in the United States. My guest on the show today is Dre Baldwin. And let me tell you just a little bit about Dre. Dre is the CEO and founder of Work on Your Game, Inc. He has given 4 TED Talks. He's written 35 books. His content on YouTube is absolutely spectacular, gaining more than 100 million views on his work. Dre is all about mindset. Dre is all about really being that just persistent and dedicated and focused individual. And what I love about Dre is it began early with him. He's somebody, and you'll hear in the episode, who began playing basketball late for when normally kids start playing. He was 14 years old, ultimately carving out a 9-year professional basketball career, which launched him into this world of content creation. And he's an amazing guy when it comes to everything to do with mindset and saying, hey, I know what I want to do. I'm going to carve out my space, and here are some steps that you use to do that. He calls that the roadmap in reverse. He'll talk about that here on the episode. I think it's a fantastic episode. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this one, and we're going to get to it right after this. Hey, leaders. Let me take you back to my early days as a high school principal. I thought I had to do it all, put out every fire, manage every crisis, and be the superhero I thought my school needed. Honestly, I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted and just felt like I was spinning my wheels. It wasn't until I got clear on my values, on my time, and on my systems that everything changed. Now, I've taken everything I learned from that experience, plus years of coaching leaders all across North America, and designed a course to help you take control of your leadership. The course is called Take Control of Your Leadership, and it's built for leaders just like you, leaders who are tired of the overwhelm and who are ready to focus on what truly matters. In this course, you will learn how to manage your time like a pro so you can stop putting out fires and start leading with intention. You'll learn how to build positive culture where everyone feels seen and heard and valued and trusted. You'll refocus on teaching and learning, becoming the instructional leader that your school needs. And you'll work on staying aligned with your vision and making real progress towards your goals. Whether you're in your first year or your 15th year as a leader, this course gives you the tools and the strategies to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Are you ready to stop spinning your wheels and start leading with impact? Head to theprincipalacademy.com and check out Take Control of Your Leadership today. And don't wait. Your school deserves the best version of you and of your leadership. Let's make this happen together. All right, folks, welcome back into Leaning Into Leadership. My guest on the show today is Dre Baldwin, who is CEO and founder of Work on Your Game, Inc. He's given 4 TEDx Talks. He's authored 35 books, put out a ton of content, was a professional basketball player, all kinds of really, really amazing stuff. And the thing about the conversation I want to get into today with you, Dre, is really around mindset, around resilience, and some of that kind of stuff. But before we get to any of those things, I know I just kind of fired off a few things from your bio, but maybe first, Dre, welcome into the show. And second, let's maybe just share a little bit of your story with folks so they kind of have a little orientation into who Dre Baldwin is.
Sure, Darren. Well, I appreciate you having me on your show. Background, played sports, as you said. Then started playing basketball till around age 14, which is pretty late if you're trying to go somewhere to sport. Barely played in high school, walked on to play at the Division III level of college ball. So I had to kind of hustle and sell my way into getting a chance to play at the pro level. So I was able to carve out a 9-year career doing that. At the same time that I started playing pro ball, which is in 2005, I started putting footage on this new website called YouTube. And that's where I started to build an audience on the internet. First started with just basketball players. And eventually I started talking about mindset. and the players appreciated it. But then also I started to attract people who were not athletes just based on the mindset stuff. And around that same time, I started creating, this is about 2009, 2010, started creating products, selling them. And that's when I realized that selling things through the internet was probably going to be my future, and it has become. And that's what I've been doing since I stopped playing in 2015. So now just running my company based on the stuff that I used in sports and applying it to the business world and everyday life.
Yeah, I love your story, and there's a piece of it I want to go back to. We'll come back into everything to do with work on your game, with the books, the speaking, all of the stuff that you do now, and really dive into mindset. But let's kind of open up the concept with mindset. You know, you talked about as a high school athlete. So I was a high school basketball coach back when I was a classroom teacher, and frequently, you coach athletes, especially male athletes. A lot of kids would say, hey, I want to be a professional athlete, and the odds are enormously stacked against you to go on to be a professional athlete. And honestly, in basketball, probably most people are like NBA, and that's all they think about. I know you played overseas in multiple countries, but before we get to that, just talk about that mindset. Talk about just kind of that resilience that you had. Where did that come from as a teenager to just not give up and to just continue to work hard to achieve what you want to achieve?
Well, the first thing is I didn't even see it as resilience at that time. I probably can see it as that now, but back then I didn't start playing again until I was age 14. So I could still feel myself getting better. So even when I finished high school and had barely played, I can still feel myself improving. Whereas a lot of my peers, by the time they're 18, they have basically become who they're going to become as an athlete. So I can still feel myself getting better. So that's why I still had this idea that maybe I can go play whatever school I end up at in college. I'll just try to make the basketball team there. Luckily, I went to a small enough school that I was a starter my freshman year playing in college. And I'm at the Division III level, was a starter through most of my college career. And another reason, Darren, is because we didn't have social media at that time. So had I had social media, and I tell people this often, maybe I would have given up earlier because I would have been looking around at all the other 17-year-olds in my age bracket and look how good these guys are compared to me. There's no way I'm going to outcompete all of them. But because of the fact that you only know the people in your neighborhood and the kids you see at home or the kids you see in school, I was basically kept ignorant enough to believe that maybe there was a chance that I could keep going and making it. And as far as the overall resilience, and at that time, I probably just saw it as just discipline. Was I had to give credit to my parents. They were not athletes and they weren't trying to raise an athlete. They were just about go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree. That's what they were all about. And I just took the discipline that I was getting from home, from my parents, and I just applied it to basketball. So just let me just go to the park every day with this ball. Good thing about basketball, you don't need anyone else to practice. And I was just bringing the basketball with me to the playground every day and just kept trying stuff. And luckily, stuff started working out and things started to come together. And again, being a late bloomer, I didn't really start to hit my stride as a player, and where I really felt confidence. I was about age 19 or 20. Whereas again, most players have already figured that out by the time they're 15. So it's just a combination of all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. And I like that you brought up the difference between, the time when you were in high school versus now. Certainly social media plays a big role in, whether we like it or not, in the development of our youth. They're seeing so many things that maybe, we certainly weren't exposed to as younger individuals. But when you and I talked before, I remember you saying that really just stuck in my mind. And I think, social media or not, that resilience, that mindset, that lack of willingness to give up is something, as you put it, I'm looking at my notes, you said mindset could be taught and that there are intentional steps to actually do that. So, I mean, obviously you have continued to adapt and grow, and you've leaned into your mindset to really become a very, very successful individual. Talk a little bit about like kind of some of that. How do we go about teaching that so that others can find that same success level?
About teaching mindset?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where it started with me was First of all, I've always been a big reader. My mom was an educator, so she had my sister and I reading books at a pretty young age. And we had the encyclopedias at home back in the day. So for the Gen Zers listening to this, encyclopedia is like Wikipedia, but a physical book, right? So
Yeah.
I was always into reading. So I was always into also the human psychology section of the bookstore, which now they've broken that down. Now you have personal development, professional development. Didn't know that phrase until I was probably in college. It was the first time I heard personal development. I was always into how the human mind works and why and how our thought processes lead to our actions, and actions lead to outcomes. So when I was playing basketball, again, I was developing these mindset things like the discipline, showing up every day to work out, the confidence to put yourself out there, the mental toughness, keep trying even when it seems to not be working, and the initiative to go in, try to initiate something, make something happen instead of waiting for things to happen. I was doing all those things as an athlete, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't like I was sitting there saying to myself, discipline, mental toughness, confidence. I wasn't saying those things. I was just using them because that's what worked for me. And when the basketball players who were watching me on the internet, they started asking questions about my thought process, because once they found out about my background, they started to get curious. Like, well, hey, Dre, I'm in high school and I just got cut from the team. So how can I, get the resilience to show up for next year's tryout? Or I have a bunch of people in my neighborhood who tell me I'm wasting time practicing basketball. It seems like you might have had the same situation, Dre. How did you deal with that? Or, Dre, I don't always feel like going to the gym and practicing, but I want to get good at basketball. What is it that keeps you coming to the gym? Because at the time, I'm putting videos on YouTube every day. So they're like, you come to the gym every day and work out. And right now you're home in Miami, but you're an unemployed pro basketball player, but you keep working out anyway. Why is it that you keep doing that? So when they started asking those questions, that's when I started to talk about mindset, because the thing about mindset, Darren, is that you can't see it. You can't count it, you can't weigh it, and you can't measure it. Whereas someone's ability to play basketball, I can just watch you play and tell you how you are. But you can't tell someone's mindset just by looking at them. You have to, basically, you got to listen to them talk, because you can't read another person's mind. You can just go off their words. So when I started to explain mindset and talk about things like discipline and confidence, mental toughness, and going and making opportunities for yourself, and sticking to things when things don't seem to be working, how do you differentiate yourself through the way that you think, which then leads to actions. I didn't think what I was sharing was going to be really groundbreaking or different for anybody, because, again, first of all, I'd always thought like that. So I thought everyone thought like this. And secondly, I can't tell who doesn't think this way, because I don't know these people who are listening to me. I just know what I know. So when I started talking about it and I saw the response to when I started explaining mindset, people were saying to me, wow, I never thought of things that way. I never considered that. That makes perfect sense, but it had never occurred to me. No one ever said that. So that's when I realized that there was more value in the mindset piece of what I was doing than even the basketball piece, simply because eventually my physical body wasn't going to be able to do basketball. And I knew I didn't want to be a trainer or a coach. I knew after I was done playing, I was going to be out of the game. So when I realized that the mindset piece was valuable for people, especially non-athletes, I said, okay, this is a bigger opportunity than me even being a basketball player. So that's when I started to latch onto that.
I just think that's super powerful. I think sometimes we discover what we're really, really, really good at when somebody taps us back on the shoulder or asks us a question about something that we just, like you said, I mean, it's just routine for you. This is just how I think. I wrote that down too from our first conversation. I thought everyone thought this way, but they don't. So let's talk a little bit about that work. I mean, you've got the Work on Your Game MasterClass. It's, over 7 million views. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about that masterclass or about some of what you're sharing there, because I think all of us, the bulk of our listeners here on the show are in the education space. Most of them are in the educational leadership space, and certainly thinking about mindset can be huge for them. So what are some pieces that you think are important for them that you're sharing there in that masterclass?
Sure. So the show itself, it started in 2016. Just because I saw that there was a lane there for audio recording, and I like audio even better than video because you don't have to edit it. It's not as hard to edit the audio as it is video. So that's where it started. And I figured what I could do uniquely was just have a show where it was just me. So it's kind of like a radio show, but it's only 20, 30 minutes every day. It's just me talking. So that's what I've been doing since 2016. And a lot of people in my audience is, of course, from other places, basketball players, non-athletes. They came and they can listen to that. And I work with a lot of professionals, entrepreneurs, et cetera. They don't have a lot of time to look at a YouTube video, but they can listen to an audio show. So they appreciate it, on their commute back and forth for work, they can catch the whole episode. So that's where it started. As far as your other question, what would I give to people who are leaders in the education space is just understanding the most important skills in leadership, which they probably are familiar with, which number one is communication skill. It's the biggest thing of all, is your ability to communicate and get your point across, get an idea out of your head and get it kind of on paper, quote unquote, so that another person can understand it. And also the other half of communication, which most people overlook, is the consumption. What is the other person saying, and being able to understand what someone else is trying to say, even if they're not so great at saying it, and kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's the example I tell people is if you were talking to your 3-year-old child and they're trying to make a point, they may not be so articulate in making the point, but you give them the benefit of the doubt and you try to understand the point they're trying to get across, even if they didn't say it perfectly. But when adults get into it with each other, we tend to remove that empathy, right? So it's just making sure that people understand those communication skills. Also, I was just talking to a coaching client today, as a matter of fact, about this, that if you really want to help people, especially when they don't have to listen to you, is they have to believe that you really care about what they want. And so first of all, you have to ask. Then when they share, you have to listen, and they have to believe that you really care about it. And there's no objective measurement of that. It is all 100% their call. And if they believe that you care about what they want, then they will tell you what they really want. And then you can use that knowledge to help them do the thing that's going to help you. Because this guy was talking about being a leader in a volunteer organization, whereas one thing to lead an organization where you can crack the whip because you're the boss, but it's another thing to lead people who don't have to listen to you at all and you have no whip to crack. So that's the biggest challenge of leadership.
Yeah, no, I think that's outstanding. And, it's, to me, leadership isn't about the title. It's always about, do you have people who are willing to follow you? And it's certainly about how you carry yourself and what you're bringing to the table. I love what you said about just making sure that people know that you care genuinely about what it is that they're wanting or what they need. In order to be successful. I want to talk just a little bit about some of your books. I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating that you have done 35 books. I've done a couple. I'm in the middle of writing 2 books right now. 35 books is it's amazing to me. And I'm looking over your shoulder, folks. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it there in Dre's background. If you're listening, I will just tell you there are a whole lot of books behind Dre, and all of them authored by Dre Baldwin. Let's start with work on your game. I mean, I think that's kind of the core of this. This is what led you down that road. Talk a little about the content there and what your primary message in that book.
Yeah, so the Work on Your Game book actually didn't come around until I'd already written about 19 books by the time I wrote that one, because I already had the idea, Darren, that I wanted to write a book that kind of encompassed the entire framework, but I was holding that idea until I could really dedicate the right amount of time to write it. So that book is actually the first one I did with a traditional publisher. So a lot of my books are not traditionally published. They're published through my company, but that one I did with a traditional publisher, that one through a traditional publisher, because they came to me after a speaking gig and said, have you thought about writing a book with a publisher? And I said, yeah. I just gave a speech called Work on Your Game. I said, I want to give a speech write a book based on that speech. And that's what that book became. And what it is, that it takes the entire philosophy of Work on Your Game, basically all the stuff we've been talking about here, and puts it into one magnum opus, so to speak. And it uses anecdotes from my own personal experience to explain, here, I'm talking about discipline, but let me tell you why discipline matters to me. I'm talking about confidence. Let me tell you what I went through to make confidence matter to me, because people don't, as the saying goes, people don't care how much you know, so they know how much you care. They want to know why it matters to you. It's not just that you have the information. So if you have the information with no background as to why you are the person to talk about it, people won't hear it. So I slip in anecdotes throughout the book of my personal story and how I came to be who I am in explaining the principles of the Work on Your Game philosophy. It is not just those 4. We also talk about selling yourself, putting yourself on, getting mentorship, making sure you keep the negative thoughts out of your head, All of that stuff is covered there in Work on Your Game.
So I want to do this. I love reading other people's books. I love hearing their stories that are a part of it. I just recently had a brand new best-selling author on the show here just a couple of weeks ago. Greg Bennick was on the show, and in our conversation, he shared something, and he's a phenomenal keynote speaker, and he shared something that I thought was super powerful. It's something that I think all of us who speak kind of live by, and that is, don't tell a story without it being connected to a point, and don't make a point without telling a story. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I hope it's okay, but pick any of them and maybe give us the really short version, but a point from the book with the story that's attached to it. I'd love to hear one.
Sure. We'll use the most popular one. It's called The Third Day. So that's another one of my books, is that red one right there. So the third day is all about discipline. And the simple antidote of the third day is, the question I ask is, why do athletes retire? Athletes retire is only 3 reasons there. Number one, they physically cannot do it anymore. So this is like Kobe Bryant saying, as much as I want to keep playing mentally, physically, I can't keep putting my body through this, so they walk away. Or Tom Brady, for example. Number 2 is no more opportunity. So in team sports, an athlete is often the last person to find out that their career is over because the phone's not ringing anymore. They finally get the point. Okay, maybe this is done. Most athletes don't get the farewell tour like Kobe or LeBron James. Most athletes, they don't go out that way. And then the third reason is what we call the third day. And the third day is basically everything an athlete does that you don't see on TV. So these are the ice baths. These are the sports massages, which don't feel good. There's the stretching. There's the day after the game. Like right now, we're recording this is during football season. Day after the football game, players are beat up, and players decide, I just don't want to deal with all of this other stuff anymore. And that's why I'm going to walk away. It's the 2-a-day trainings in the off season. It's all the stuff that you have to do to maintain the level that keeps you at as a pro. And when you no longer want to do that work, then it's time to walk away. I heard Jon Stewart, as a matter of fact, he was on the show, and he was saying he knew it was time to walk away from the Daily Show. I think he's since come back, but at the time he had walked away. Yeah. And he was saying that I was starting to show up to the studio a little bit later. I was starting to leave a little bit earlier. And that's when I said, I got to get out of here because I'm no longer dedicating myself to the game the way that I'm supposed to. So the third day is all about, how do you show up on the days when you don't really feel like showing up, when the energy is not quite there? And you have to show up, you have to do your job because you're expected to as a professional. Can you show up and have your best day on the day that feels like it's your worst day? And when you no longer want to deal with the third day, then it's time to get out of the game. So that's what that principle is about.
I love that, man. That's such a great story. And it's, it's just so real. And so I think those of us who were not professional athletes can really make the connection to that, yeah, those aren't the things that we see by any stretch of the imagination, but every one of us in the roles that we hold through the course of our professional lives will have those things that maybe are behind the scenes that we deal with that people don't necessarily, know about. And those are typically the things that lead you to, in my case, when I left public education, it's a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that finally I'm like, okay, I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm ready to go do this next thing. So I really appreciate that you shared that story. I want to get to one thing else before we run out of our time. Our time is just flying by, which I knew it would, sitting down with you. Obviously, this is the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, so there's always a focus on leadership. And I know one of your primary audiences, one of your primary focus groups typically are people in the sales space. And certainly there's leadership involved there as well. What are maybe 1 or 2 things that you would share with today's leader in whatever role they may have that we haven't already talked about that can help them maybe bring their game up to the next level?
For the leader themselves?
Yeah.
Most important thing is, what's the goal? So this is, anytime anybody comes to me with a challenge or a question, the first thing I want to know is, what's the goal? What are we actually trying to achieve? Because I am unqualified to give anyone advice until I know what they're trying to do. Because often people make the mistake of thinking someone's trying to do one thing, but they're actually trying to do another thing. You give your advice based on the wrong assumption. So with any leader, I'm going to find out, what is it that you want to get out of your sales staff? Of course, the obvious answer is you want to make more sales, but then we got to dig deeper. We got to go levels deeper into, where are they coming up short? Are people just not making enough calls? Are they not coming in when they're short on their sales numbers? I've talked to organizations who have that problem. People who are just, maybe your team is just not full of A players. Maybe these are just not level 10 salespeople who you have on your team. Maybe people are just getting overwhelmed because they're allowing their schedules to get thrown off by taking calls and impromptu meetings and all of those things. We got to find out what the actual issues are. And then once we're clear on what all the issues are and they're all laid on the table, then we can start deconstructing based on the goal, what is getting in the way. So we know what the goal is. We know what's getting in the way. Now we can start attacking each one of these points piece by piece. But what I find is it's much easier to solve a problem when you compartmentalize, Darren, and you break it down into its component pieces rather than looking at it as the big monster. And often people get overwhelmed. They just get mentally overwhelmed because there's so much going on. But when we break it down and say, okay, here are the 15 things that are happening. Let's address thing number 1, number 2, number 3. Now it's easier to handle than just trying to do it all at once. So that's the first one, is just figuring out what the goal is in deconstruction. And we call that the roadmap in reverse of how we're actually going to get things done. And if I had to give you one more that I would give to people in leadership positions these days, it's making sure that everyone's being held to a standard. People need to know what the rules are. So I was just doing a live stream just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and the topic was, you're a bad boss. And the whole point was helping people understand that one of the things that makes a boss not good, not really, the metaphor was about being a boss to yourself, but you can apply this in organizations as well, is that if you are not clear on what the rules are, and those rules are not clearly articulated and upheld, then people will not follow them. So people have to know what the rules are, and they have to know that the rules will be enforced. And when they know that, they will follow them, because people spend their entire lives listening to and respecting and following authority. So if you present the rules and then you enforce them, people will respect that you will enforce the rules, and they'll pretty much go along with it. But as soon as they see that the rules are not being enforced, or that there are no rules, well, they're going to behave as if there are no rules. This is just how humans are. And you said you worked in public education. I don't know what grades you dealt with, but it's kind of like second graders. As soon as they see the substitute teacher walk into class, everybody knows, all right, it's going to be a zoo today. Because the teacher represents the rules, all right? And if the teacher's not there, there are no rules. Okay, we're going to have fun today. But then as soon as the teacher comes back the next day, those same kids who were acting as if they had no home training, all of a sudden they're sitting at the desk with their hands folded. What's the difference? All right, the rules showed up. So that's how human beings are.
I love that, man. That is so very true. And yeah, I mean, I think as I was listening to you talk, another quick sports reference popped into my head. You mentioned earlier, it's football season right now. My team, I'm a huge Bronco fan. They beat the Jets this past weekend as we're recording, and listen to Aaron Rodgers talk about, his coach saying one thing and him saying another thing. And basically he was like, we don't need to change a bunch of things. We just need to hold people accountable. And, right. If you have an expectation, if you have a standard and you hold people to that standard, what you're saying is absolutely the truth. In most cases, people want to be held to a standard. They don't want to live in a chaos. In a workplace, this chaos. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Excellent stuff there, man. I love that so much. We've reached that point in the show where I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody here on the show. Again, it's the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, and you've shared so many great things here, but I'm curious, what's maybe something, Dre, that you're doing to lean into leadership right now?
That's a great question. What am I doing to lean into leadership? Really, my focus this week, we're recording this on a Tuesday, my focus this week has been on making sure you win every minute of the day. So I was hearing, speaking of football, Nick Saban, former football coach, talking about how when he was coaching a mediocre team, they were about to play one of the best teams in the nation. And he said to them, don't focus on winning the game. Just focus on every single play. Whoever's on the field, make sure you win that play. And if each one of you does that the whole game, whatever happens, happens. And he ended up winning the game. And from there, he just developed what they came to be known for as the process, which is every single day, every single play, every minute of every practice, everyone just win that minute. And we have the talent. If everyone does what they're supposed to do to the best of your ability every moment, we're usually going to end up on top. And I think we can tell that pretty much worked out. So just winning every minute for me, every minute of the day. Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing it the best that I can be doing it? And if you do that, you can consciously remind yourself of that often enough. Eventually it becomes a habit to where you don't have to think about it. So that's been my focus literally for this week.
I love it, man. That's awesome stuff right there. People are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to check out even more work on your game. How do they find you and how do they check out your work?
Well, I'm on all the social media, so whatever platform you prefer, I'm there. My name is easy to find and I'm public, so just look up Dre Baldwin or Work on Your Game. As far as off social media, workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where our focus is right now. That's where we do all of our coaching, speaking, consulting, all of that stuff happens in the university. So that's just workonyourgameuniversity.com.
Standing. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes for people to go and hit those links. Dre Baldwin, thank you for joining me here on Leaning Into Leadership.
Sure. Thank you for having me on, Darren. I appreciate you sharing your platform.
All right. Once again, big thank you to Dre Baldwin for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Folks, make sure you get down into the show notes and get connected with Dre. Check out his work and check out some of his books, his TED Talks. Just truly an inspirational guy. And again, I appreciate him coming on the show. And now it's time for a pep talk. So this week's pep talk, I want to go back to episode 178 that I did with Todd Bloomer last week. And one of the questions that Todd asked me was, what am I reading? I shared that I was reading Becoming a Leader of Character by General James Anderson at the recommendation of a good longtime childhood friend of mine. And for the pep talk, I've just been reflecting on this quite a bit, just how important it is for leaders to be reading content both in their space and then also outside of their space. Be reading things not only that help you sharpen the sword, but also that help you decompress and let go and not get so overly focused on the things that you're doing. So my challenge for you is simple. As we go here into the month of December, if you're not reading, find a couple of books, dive in, listen to audio books, listen to podcasts, something that can help you not only sharpen the sword, but also help you just disconnect and maybe get lost in a different world. For me, I love books like all the James Patterson, Alex Cross series. Absolutely love those books. You know, am I a true crime guy? Yeah, I love it. But I also like the fictional crime stuff. I don't fight crime. I'm not in law enforcement. So for me, that's kind of a fun escape. But whatever it might be for you, lean into that. Allow yourself to exercise a little bit of that type of self-care. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. As always, get out there and have a road to awesome.